Welcome to Phillips Mill Art Talk. I'm Laura Womack, and with me is our technical director, Jen McHugh.
Hi, everyone.
Tonight we talk with Helena van Emmerick-Finn. Helena has had a colorful career, starting as a quick sketch artist on the Atlantic City Boardwalk to traveling with the circus in the UK, and many stops in between. Over 2 decades of that demanding work honed her drawing skills. She's an exacting technician who's done a lot of independent study. Primarily a pastel artist, Helena has expanded into oils. Helena's family emigrated from Holland a few weeks before she was born and settled in Upper Bucks County. She attended the Philadelphia College of Art, where she studied graphic design, photography, and filmmaking. Helena is a regular participant in the Phillips Mill Juried art show, and after college, she traveled extensively, including backpacking through Europe, North Africa, and India. Welcome to Art Talk, Helena.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
And welcome to you in the audience. Join us with your questions in the Q&A. We'd love to have you as part of the conversation. Okay, let's jump right into the artwork, Jen. Let's start the slideshow. Okay, so first, Helena, we're going to look at some works that have been in the more recent Phillips Mill Juried art show. And here's the Grange. Tell us about this work.
Well, every year in the middle of August, I go to the Wrightstown Grange Fair and for a photo shoot. And the cows especially attracted my attention because they're so large, they're so peaceful, and the lighting is great in that barn in particular. I picked this image because there seemed to be a real kind of camaraderie and understanding between the two animals. I love the ears on the cow that was laying down. And the only thing that I changed from the original photograph was the placement of the vertical beam because it was throwing everything off. But other than that, it was pretty much what I saw there. And one of my favorite parts of the painting is the reflection of the sky on the top of the standing animal. And also the way that the reflection from the hay just shoots up on her belly. So this was, I believe, a 12 by 18 piece.
That's amazing, Helena. Actually, I hadn't noticed the reflection of the sky on the standing cow. That is beautiful. That's such a surprise when you notice it finally with your help.
Well, I think every artist, they'll do a piece, but there'll be certain little things that are really special to them. And maybe no one will notice, but that's what I was going for with this piece.
I think the light on it generally is just really beautiful. It's interesting, it's backlit, and as photographers are very familiar with it, I'm sure fine artists as well. It's a difficult lighting condition, and yet this picture practically glows.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to have the truck also. I wasn't sure whether to put that in, and when I try to admit it, it just didn't work. So I think that really kind of works with the whole theme also.
Yeah, really nice. Okay, Jen, what do we have next? And those of you in the audience, if you want to ask Helena about her work, we've had some conversations already. She's really good about the technical aspects. So I think it's a really nice opportunity to talk to a pastel artist and somebody who's just a really accomplished painter. Okay, Helena, this is a beautiful picture. This was, I thought it was last year, but it looks like 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
I did this during the Artists of Yardley plein air event 2 years ago. And I think it was near the end. We had a 2-week window to paint. And I think it was near the end, and I was getting a little burnout. And I decided to set up by Calico Corners in their parking lot and just face the church. I had an umbrella and everything, but there was a lot of glare going on. So I mostly just picked out the silhouette of the church and the tombstones, and then just highlighted it. And after just a short period of time, because the light was so intense, I just stopped because I couldn't see anymore. And if you'll notice in the bottom half, there's very, very little pastel on there. I use a ground colored paper that has a slight texture to it. It's called Pastel Matte. It's made by Claire Montaigne. It's a French company. And so I always pick their sienna color, which gives a real glow. I find that, like, especially with greens, it's really good to break it up with an undercolor. And so yeah, when I took it home and I got to see what it really looked like, because after a while painting plein air, you really can't really tell what you're doing. And I thought, I think this is unusual. It's a little different. I'm just going to leave it that way. I'm going to leave it the way it is.
What do you mean sometimes when you're painting plein air, you can't tell what you're doing? Is that because the light is so strong, which you really captured here? Or is it just from being out there?
I think it's both. After a while, it's just hard to focus for me. But that's okay. It's good to stop, it's good to stop before you start wrecking it. And I felt like more and more I do that. I stop, and if it's a plein air piece where it's all required to be done plein air, I might go back a second day rather than try to finish it when I'm really not sure what I'm doing anymore.
No.
And so I was really, really pleased with this piece. And when
Sorry, please go ahead. Yeah, you go.
When I submitted a piece to a juried show, I don't usually do something specifically for a juried show, but I'll pick what I think is my best piece that's still a little bit unusual. And since my style is not that unusual, I'll pick something where the subject is a little different.
So you stand out. That makes sense. So Helena, I'm not an artist. Help me understand what you did here that captures that harsh, overhead midday, I'm assuming, light. I've taken pictures. I actually took a trip one time where I was so excited. I was out hiking around and I took a bunch of photographs, and they all came back sort of yellow and strange colored because I didn't know how to manage that overhead sun. And yet you've done it with pastels. How did you do that?
Well, it puts when it's that intense, it puts it it puts the building in silhouette, like a strong silhouette. And you have to keep focusing on different parts of the scene and your eyes have to adjust to that. So your eyes are always adjusting, but a camera can't capture that. They'll just do some, they can't keep adjusting. It's just a one-shot deal.
Right.
But I think it's the contrast between the kind of the cool shadows and then the hot colors in the lawn that really make it sparkle. Even though it's cut in half, they tell you never to cut a painting in half like that. But that's
yeah, you don't notice it here. You don't notice. Yeah. Okay, Jem, what's up next? There we go. And a different kind of light. Here you have these figures silhouetted by that white light. Again, we've all been there. Tell us about this experience, Helena, and painting it.
Well, I took the photo for this piece when I was going to a meeting downtown. I guess it was probably at winter time. And I wanted to do it because the colors were so unnatural because of all the artificial light. And normally, most of my paintings are more natural and earthy and daytime. And I just love the contrast with these acidy colors and the hot colors in the front, and then the city hall in the background. And then I like the kind of the blown out effect of the lights that are over the banners. I think the banners were for the Academy of Music at the time, because this dates back a while. And I just made sure that the figures just leaned or moved just a little bit, just to guide your eye through the painting toward the back.
Yeah, I think you work a lot on composition, don't you, Helena?
I don't think about it a lot, frankly, but I this was a 1-point perspective, so that made it very easy, to get the perspective correct. But yeah, composition's a weird thing. If you try too hard to do a composition, it looks contrived. So there's got to be a sweet spot there. So something that kind of happens naturally, without too much thought, I think is the best way for me to go.
Okay. All right, good. What do we have next, Jen?
Oh, and the professor.
Yeah.
Well, I love cats, but I took a picture of this beautiful ginger cat in Frenchtown, New Jersey. He was on a stoop on one of the streets where there were cafes and art galleries. And I wanted to show, I wanted to give him I wanted him to take over the whole picture plane pretty much, because he was looking so confident, like he owned the place. So originally I had called him the mayor of Frenchtown. And I was lucky enough to get it into Phillips Mill, and someone actually recognized the cat and the stoop that he was laying on. And I just thought that was remarkable, that, out of nowhere. And so she said, I know that cat. His name is Professor so-and-so. And I just found that amazing. So, and a few people said after it got into the show, well, I can't believe you got into Phillips Mill with a cat. And that made me realize, don't worry about what the subject matter is. Just put in your best piece that's also a little interesting. And my favorite part of this piece is the magenta in his ear that picks up the magenta in the trim on the building.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think his nose and his eyes are really good too. They're just so sharp in all of that fluffy, luscious fur.
I think cats' faces are the most beautiful thing in the world, really.
So are cats hard? I know that artists work very hard at anatomy, and cats are known for just being a sack of flesh. They don't really, their skin doesn't always hug tight.
Mhm.
So are they hard to draw because the anatomy is a little bit obscured, and yet you need that definition for the recognition of the subject?
I don't really, I have never really studied anatomy at all during my art education. So what I do is I go by shapes, the outside shape of things, and then put it down and then correct it until it looks right. But yeah, I don't really worry about anatomy. I guess I
Okay.
should.
Well, I think you're a bit unconventional, if I may say so, Helena. Are you not? You went to school, but it sounds like from our conversations that a lot of what has influenced you as an artist is your own studies, the research you've done.
Mm-hmm. I've when I started doing something other than portraits, I devoured every book I could on French Impressionism. First, it was Mary Cassatt, because she was also a pastel artist, and Degas, with their figure work. But then I wanted to study more about landscape and other things other than the figure and the portrait. So I just got books on Manet, who's one of my favorites now, Bert Marisot, Seurat, everyone I could find. And I would study their palette, study their technique. Even though it was oil painting, I really got more out of the books on oil painting, because they taught you more about making a picture, making a painting, where books on pastel are usually more about just individual stroke work and individual application, and not painting as a whole.
All right, good. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. Let's take a look at the pastels, and then later we'll take a look at the oils that you started working in.
Okay.
How long have you been working in pastels, Helena?
52 years.
Wow,
I know.
good for you. Okay, here we are. Tulips Keukenhof. I'm assuming this is in the Netherlands.
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, my family's from Holland. It means a lot to me. And I think it was 2008. My husband's Irish American and I'm Dutch American. So we did our heritage tour. We went to Ireland first and then we went to Holland, and we timed our trip to Holland right around the peak season of Keukenhof, which are beautiful tulip gardens near Leiden, right in the middle of the tulip industry area. And we had typical for Dutch weather, we had one nice day. And I kept checking the weather to make sure that we could go to Keukenhof that day. And this is a scene from there. And it's just an amazing place. I think they're only open about 6 weeks in the spring.
Yeah,
So
beautiful
a lot of
picture.
material from that.
Yeah. I think we've got a question coming in. Please join the conversation yourself by writing in the Q&A. Jen, what have we got?
Yes, Mary said, Helena, you work in dry, soft pastels. Have you ever worked in oil pastels?
Oh, well, I have tried them. It's really a very different medium. To me, they're waxy, they're more waxy. So the blending is very different. The application is very different. And in art shows, they're considered to be two separate media. I didn't take to them, but I've seen other people do fabulous work with them. And they more and more now they're coming out with great brands, and there's so many more choices than when I first started. So I'm sure that's the case for the oil pastels too. But I haven't given them a chance. So.
All right, what are we looking at next, Jen?
Oh,
Feeding his flock.
well, sometimes at art shows, they'll go, oh, there's a chicken lady. Because once I started painting chickens, I just couldn't stop. And they're just so much fun. And so many people now have chickens, suburban people, city people, everyone has chickens in their backyard. So I've had a lot of opportunities to get great photos. And I just enjoy it because there's always movement. They create their own compositions. They're funny, and there was always someone causing a problem or causing trouble. And it's one of my favorite things. If I haven't been painting in a while or I feel rusty, I'll just do a chicken painting and I'll just feel like I'm back again. They give you a certain amount of freedom because they're so wacky and there's so much texture to them, and colorful. Even the white ones just reflect light so beautifully. So.
Yeah, and I think this angle is really challenging because you're foreshortened from, yeah, I can't even begin to describe that, Helena. Maybe you can.
Well, it's just I just take lots of pictures when I go on a photo shoot, and I'll just pick something out, and then what I'll do is I'll sketch it in and then correct until I get it where it all works together. So this one I think was about a 12 by 16, and it started out as a demo for an art league demonstration. But
Nice.
I can't tell you, I just love chickens.
These guys are great. Okay, more questions coming in. Keep them coming. Jen, what do people want to know?
We had someone that asked, what is 1% perspective?
1 point perspective.
Okay, that's what I thought it was, but I
Yeah.
didn't want to answer for you.
When all the lines vanish into 1 point. So it's usually if you're looking down an alley or a street or certain, the nightlight painting had a strong 1 point perspective.
I think we have a picture coming up too in, you should have a series of pictures that show the development. There we go. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah,
Always
that's one
right on
point
top of it.
perspective also.
Yeah. So you can see, you can't see my cursor, but you can see the point in just off center. There we go. Thank you, Jen. Yep. And okay, yeah, good. We appreciate the technical questions. What else do we have in the Q&A, Jen?
Sure. Virginia says, hi, Helena. And then she said, do you use fixative? And if so, under what part of the work? For instance, as a portion of the work or only as a finish?
Well, good question, because it's very legitimate to use fixative if you want to, but I never use it because it flattens the work, it dulls it, and you have to put it under glass anyway. So it has to be protected anyway, whether you spray it or not. But some artists, and I don't use it, but as I said, I feel it's totally legitimate. Some artists spray their preliminary passovers with pastel just to set it so they can work on top of it. But it changes the texture when you do that. But that works fine for some artists. Some spray it because they want it to get darker. And there are different products out there. I couldn't give you much information about them because I don't find a need to use it at all. I frame under glass with a spacer, and that usually does it. I used to do frame with matting, and I do like works on paper that are matted, but I found that with if there's any excess pastel dust, it would fall on the mat, and then I'd have to reframe it all the time. And also a few galleries who mostly carried oils asked me to frame without mats because it would fit in a little better with their other work.
Okay, great. Let's look at some more pictures, and then we'll come back to your questions.
Oh, okay.
Helena, this is just, I think this is masterful. It's a perfect still life.
Oh, thank you. Well, as I said, my heritage means a lot to me, and I have a whole collection of Delft. People, I pick them up at antique stores. People gift them to me. I've inherited some, and I just love them. And so I try to keep in with a real old world tradition of using a really dark background and having the tulips pop out toward me. Tulips, of course, are another very Dutch motif. And I believe I did this on a different surface. I use amber sand pastel surface when I'm doing a tighter still life, because it really, I can really get more detail that way and work the surface a lot without it getting muddy.
And that's an issue with pastels, isn't it? You can't put with oil, I think you can put more on top. I
Right.
could be wrong, but with pastels, you really reach a limit very quickly. Is that right?
Right. Especially if you put down darks, you should do them very thin and kind of spread them out a little bit. And then you can work on top of it. But you don't want to load up the tooth of the paper. Now I use different kinds of sand, but they're all sanded papers with a lot of texture, and they're numbered according to how fine it is. So the higher the number, the finer the tooth. So as I said, for this, I like a finer tooth, but for most of my work, I use a pretty rough tooth.
Why is that?
Because I like to lay it on. I have a heavy hand.
Okay. I just really like the delicate flowers with all that texture next to the ceramic shoe. I think it's really nice.
And I have to make a confession. Those are soap flowers. They are not real tulips, because real tulips would never have survived the amount of time I put into this painting.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I don't know that you have to, but we appreciate it. Okay, one more picture and then we'll go back to the Q&A. Put your questions in the Q&A. All right, this looks very Bucks County to me, Helena.
Yes, this is the Locktender's house in New Hope. And I did it during the Bucks County plein air in 2019. And I was just, I parked my car across the street from it on Main Street in New Hope. And I put my hatch up on my car, and I just sat up under the hatch of my car to shield me from the sun. It's a 12 by 12, I believe, and it won a substantial prize at the competition. And I just put it smack. I put that building smack in the middle, which they tell you not to do. I like symmetry, I guess. And so I've got the symmetry of the building and the fence, but then everything around it, I try to move around so that your eye will move a bit and not be stuck there. But I love that building. It really catches the light beautifully. And the shadow under the roof moved a lot while I was there. So I had to make a commitment to how deep that shadow was going to be. So
Yeah, to me, Helena, there's a lot of color in this picture. And when we talked before, you said you don't like when people use too much color. And so I wanted to, get with you on that. I've got this that lavender, that lilac colored shadow that is just so delightful. And then you've got those blues and greens in the tree on our right. Lots of color things happening here. So how does that jive with what you told me?
well, just putting just token strokes down just to make it look, as I said, some people think, oh, it's arty if I just, have lots of strokes everywhere, but they have to be doing something. And then also there has to be a harmony too. A lot of times I'll put things down and just think, oh no, that's just too blaring. It has to fit the whole, it has to fit somewhere in the whole picture. And if the strokes are very intense, if the colors are very intense, then if everything's very intense, then there's no focus. So it's good to pick something that's really, really going to catch your attention and
All
work
right.
around that.
Let's get to the questions, and then I want to hear a little bit more about your adventures.
Okay, Mary said, thank you for your answer about oil pastels. Which brands of soft pastels do you tend to work with? And do you also like to use pastel pencils?
Well, yes, I like pastel pencils. I use Derwent, but they're not waxy. I like them because they don't leave a waxy film when I sketch with them, so that I can work a pastel on top. If you use a waxy pencil, like a regular colored pencil that has more wax in it, it will resist holding onto the pastel and will drop off. And the brands of pastel, I have a lot. I mean, it's been 50 years, and so every 10 years or so, I would get the newest, latest, wonderful pastel that was out on the market. And so I have the leftover of, I don't know, so many different brands. I have Terry Ludwig's. I have Unison, Sennelier. Okay, there's a few more I can't think of right now. But if I were to just buy one set, they all have different qualities. They're all wonderful. But if I were to just buy one set, it would be Schminke's. They're a really nice, they just have lots of subtle colors. They have grayed down colors. It's not, sometimes the sets are all very garish, and they just have a wonderful grading system. And they go on very, very soft, but not too soft. Senneliers are great for the end game, when you just want to really put some really strong highlights on, or strong patches of color, and they're great for that.
But they're too strong for you in
To do the whole
their
thing.
own? Yeah, to do the whole, okay. Let's see. We got a question about paper. I think you talked about it a little bit, but maybe, Jen, let's see if we can get a specific answer.
Yes, Karen asked, what paper do you prefer? Sanded, velour, etc.
Velour, because I have like a choppy impressionist style most of the time. Velour is, I think, more for more delicate work. I've tried it. I didn't take to it either. I don't think it suits, but I've seen some very beautiful, soft, delicate work done with it. I started out with Canson early on, and I think that's what most of the artists were using before they start. Canson is a fairly smooth, nice quality drawing paper, but then artists started using sandpaper, just from the commercial hardware store sandpaper, and everybody just loved it. And it just like, it just, the work was bold and impressionistic, and they could make great strokes, but it wasn't archival. So the art supply companies started making archival sandpaper. So, but my favorites right now, I really do like the pastel matte. It's not as aggressive. It doesn't have as strong a tooth, but it really, there's a lot of stroke integrity, which means you put it down and it stays there. And you can make nice, sharp edges on it. And it doesn't flake off as much, and it doesn't give off as much, because we really do have to be very careful about the flying pastel dust. It's very important to be cautious about that for your health. So
And
that's one reason I've switched to the pastel matte more recently.
okay, and you wear a mask, Helena, is that right?
I do. I wear a dust mask. I wear a glove on my drawing hand. I have a tray under my drawing board so that any pastel dust will fall there. And I cover the intake vent for my heating and air conditioning system in my drawing room. But
That's a lot of precaution for pastels.
well, I'm really sloppy, and I'm a bad housekeeper. So I feel like at least that I'm protecting myself.
Well done. Okay, let's go to, since we're talking technical stuff, we've got another technical question, and please keep sending your questions if you've got them. Let's deal with the technical stuff, and then let's take a look at your process after that.
Sure. Bursu asked, and I apologize if I mispronounced that name, what type of camera do you use for your photo shoots?
My iPhone. And it's great. I don't, even though I did major briefly in photography in college, when I was flitting around with different majors, I really never could understand the technical end of it. So I love the whole digital world of photography. I love the iPhone. I love Adobe Photoshop Elements. I mean, it's just made it so easy. I use it for everything. I use it for photographing my work when it's done, to put it online. I just use it for everything.
Helena, I've heard, I think this conversation has probably been put to rest, but just this, I want to ask you about it. I've heard artists talk about, I can always tell when a picture has been done from a photograph. Any thoughts from you on that? You clearly don't have that problem.
Well, I don't really go for strict realism anyway. So as long as the painting works and it's from a photograph, and it looks like it's from a photograph, but it's still a good painting, I'm okay with it. But I do, when I started working plein air, it did really open my eyes to how much more atmosphere there is, how much more subtlety there is in nature, and how how the photography can miss that.
Yep. It's a good note taker, right? And then you go and
Mhm.
do your own thing with that as a reminder. Yeah. Okay, Jen, let's take a look at the process that led to one of my favorite of Helena's pictures. And would you call, Helena, would you call a pastel a painting or a picture, or is there a correct term there?
Well, there is. If it looks like a drawing, it's a drawing. If it looks like a painting, it's a painting. Because it's your approach or it's your technique that makes it one or the other. But sometimes it's hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
But I in shows though, I will probably enter the drawing category, even if my work is more painterly sometimes. So it depends on the show and how they look at it too.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, this is obviously this is a beautiful arrangement of flowers from a dear friend of mine, Joanne Goodwin, who's famous for who's made the flowers at the Phillips Mill annual Juried Art Show famous because she does such a fabulous job. So tell us about creating this wonderful picture.
Well, thank you. During, I don't know what year this was, maybe 2019. During the art show in the fall, I took some photos and I mean, her arrangements are just out of this world. She has a great one. She would make a great one for the lobby also. That was great. But I picked this one because I wanted to show the room of the mill and the downstairs room of the mill and some of the artwork with it. And I did this to be considered for the poster competition. It didn't get in, but I was just so happy. She bought it from me. Can I say that? And I was just so honored that she did.
I hope
Because
so.
I'm sure there was many paintings done of her flowers. So
It's
so
really
photo,
beautiful, and you did them justice, so that's
well,
nice.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess the photograph on the left was just as I took it, and then I cropped it in Adobe Photoshop Elements to make it a little more interesting. I guess I didn't center it the way I usually do with things, and I wanted the pamphlets or the folios on the table to kind of direct the eye in. That was actually the hardest part of the whole thing. Was getting them to look like they worked. The perspective was different. If you notice, I did leave a few out just to simplify it a bit. But that was actually the hardest part of the painting.
That's surprising with that amazing arrangement right there. Okay, let's take a look at we'll take a look at there we go. So Jen has really done a nice job with the
Okay.
slideshow. We see the sequence, and then Helena, I don't know if you want to work from here. She also has them individually, the whole there we go. Yeah.
So I started out with, I believe the paper was about a 12 by 16 or 12 by 16. And I start out with, let's see, a bit of a grid on there. So I've started using grids just to transfer the image. I find it actually makes me freer in my drawing rather than measuring with a ruler or whatever to get the image from the photograph. So I use 1-point perspective, and I start out with on the sienna paper from Pastel Mat, and I use the Derwent terracotta pencil, pastel pencil. That way, if anything shows through, if the pencil marks show through, they kind of blend into the background, and they don't. Rather than using charcoal or a dark color, sometimes it'll blend in and muddy the colors. So this way, everything is about the same. And I don't really work on values so much. For me, it's just the shapes of things, the general shape and placement of things. And again, there's 1-point perspective there. What I did though was, I guess I knew the center of interest would be that one sunflower. And what you see there, that black dot is actually the center of the sunflower. And to the left of it is the 1-point perspective.
Right. So you're taking it off center that way as well.
Right.
Okay. Yep. And then
And
here you're putting in the darks. Is that right, Helena?
right, I start out with the darks and I just scrumble. It's, you know, it's not pretty. But I just scrumble it just to get a feel for values. I'll put down values and then change my mind five times. But, and this is also like the really ugly stage of a painting where you start to doubt everything you've ever done. And you think, oh, this will never happen. But so again, you just have to remember you've done this before and it's going to be okay. And if it's not, you could always rip it up. But they all start out like looking like this, I'm afraid to say. But I get the darks first, and then if you notice, there's a highlight on the urn. So I do the darkest darks and the lightest lights, and that way you can tell what your value range is.
Interesting.
So
okay.
take the next one. So I already started to, sometimes if I feel like I've blocked in and got a good general idea of the total, I'll go for the detail next. I don't wait till the very end necessarily. I noticed, especially with the green, I didn't fill everything in with the green because I knew I wanted to have really strong, clean color on top of it. So I made sure that was pretty thin and just spotty. And then I can go back and fill in the green. I know I worked as far as the back wall, which is white. I worked on that just to get the right kind of muted, partly shadow, kind of off-white wall. So that I know I spent a lot of time on also. I wanted to get the portfolio rack in there too, because I feel like that's an important part.
Yes.
And I knew at one time who did that painting, that large painting over the portfolio rack, and I can't remember.
We'll get the
But I know
catalog
she's been in
out,
the show
Helena.
a lot.
Yeah.
She's been in the show a lot.
Okay. And yeah, this the starting to take form here.
Yeah, and so here, you know, I'll go back and forth, smooth things out, rough things up, go back in, clean things up, emphasize some things, mute other things. I wanted to have the paintings at the background, as I said, but I didn't want them to take over. I just wanted a suggestion of that, and that's, yeah. And then the next one is the finished piece.
Yeah.
So.
And that looks like Phillips Mill. I mean, I like it because it's very much an insider. You know, if you've been to the show, this show looks like this. I mean, obviously a lot more beautiful works on the wall and sculptures, but this is iconic. I hadn't realized before, Helena, how now that you mention putting the books on the table, just so that they draw your eye inward. I hadn't realized that before, and now I'm just very fascinated by that.
And those books are the artist's bios, aren't they?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and that's an important part of it too. It's,
Yes,
you know, everyone's in there.
we always hope the artist will share them with us. That's part of the work of putting the show on. But this is beautiful. Thanks for going through that process with us. I want to invite you all to join with your questions again, but I'm going to indulge a little bit here. Helena, tell us about your peripatetic artist career. You started as a quick sketch artist in Atlantic City Boardwalk.
Mhm.
Unusual beginning for a fine artist, I think, maybe not.
Well, when I was going to school, some of my friends were doing that to pay their tuition. They were working on the boardwalk. And when I decided not to go back to school, I really needed to make money. So I tried it too. And it was very well paid and it was fun. And it was kind of the cool job on the boardwalk to have. And I was in Atlantic City for 2.5 years, 2.5 summers. And then I went to Wildwood. What I would do is I would work all summer, and we would work 6-7 days a week. usually in the evenings, but that's when the boardwalk would be busy. And I would save every penny, just like stay in a cheap boarding house with the other artists, and travel all over the world, and then come back broke, and start over again in May. And I worked
And then,
I'm sorry. I worked.
no, please go ahead.
I lived in London for 2 years, and I made my living on the street sketching portraits. They allowed us to set up on weekends on the railings on the sidewalk on the other side of the park from Buckingham Palace. It was on, I think it was Piccadilly. The name of the street was Piccadilly. So I did that, and I worked at a carnival. I didn't actually travel with them at night or anything, but I would go to where they were set up, different places. And they had seen me somewhere and asked me to do that. And but it had to be inexpensive. So I think I did little profiles, quick sketches for 50 pence each. And it was really cool being one of the carnies.
So 50 pence each, did that add up? I know we've had a lot of inflation since then. Did that add up? You said it paid well.
And it was fun. And another time I rented a spot at a sport expo center in Birmingham, England, and set up with my portraits. And then for the ping pong championships, which is big over there, but I know it's not a real big deal here, but it was big in Europe. And Bob Marley and the Wailers came through, and I drew his picture and two of his bandmates. So that was really, I did a good job on the guys, because they had big Rasta hair, dreadlocks. But on him, I was just so like in awe and just like so overwhelmed. I think I made him cross-eyed, but he was so nice and so polite. He was just lovely. So that was like, and I'm just really honored to have done that. So
I think that's a resume item there, Helena.
should I say
Okay.
about my North Africa thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tell us.
So I was traveling in a VW bus with a bunch of other hippies, and we were crossing the border between Morocco and Algeria, and they wouldn't let us through until the guys had their hair cut, because they all had long hair back then. And that I had to do a little sketch portrait of one of the guards. And I said, oh, I don't have my materials with me. And they produced a little stubby pencil and a piece of craft paper. And I did it, and I was scared to death because it was like nighttime. And he was happy, and they let us through. So.
Wow. So I'm glad you did a good job there, Helena. I'm not sure what would have happened. Well, that's a lot of adventure, but I think having the quick sketch artist, you have to, there's a lot of pressure there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a different kind of pressure, I gather. But I would think that having to do quick sketches all day long, catch a likeness, would be a very demanding exercise, very demanding training for being a fine artist.
It is. It's like doing 12 commission portraits in an hour for 4 hours. And I mean, the money, as I said, the money was good. It was quite good, but I could only do it for so long. And also I was starting to do better with my fine art. So I made the transition slowly. I overlapped for years, and I was grateful to have the income from the sketching, though, because that took a lot of pressure off of the fine art.
Yeah. And you like doing the fairs, is that right? You like the outdoor work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I only do 3 now. There and a number of indoor things that are similar, but they're indoors. A lot easier.
All right. Well, I want to get to some oils before we go, and we've got a couple
Okay.
more questions. Jen, what do you have for us?
Sure. Jean asked, do you ever combine the various images taken of one subject matter, and do you ever create a work of art from them?
I probably just have to say no. usually just do one shot. I don't even really change that much. I just take lots and lots and lots of photographs till I get something I like. But I might move an element, as I said, like maybe a vertical, I might move it over a little to the left or what, and I might leave out some details, but I rarely combine from different photos. I'm sure it's done very well by other people, but I don't do that. If I try to make up too much or try to mess it, it shows. It just shows.
Okay. Another question, Jen?
Sure. Chi wanted to know, has your style changed over your long artistic career? If so, how? Who are your inspirations?
I'm sure it's changed. At the beginning, I worked with very soft pastel colors, and my palette was very different. It was pinks and purples in the beginning. I was very influenced by a Monet show that I had seen. I guess the Modern in New York years ago, and that really affected me a lot and got me started. And then I guess just styles change, and I got more confident in what I was doing. So I got bolder and bolder and started using other colors as well. And I'm sorry, what was the other end of that question?
Who were your influences?
Well, certainly, as I said earlier, Mary Cassatt and Degas. Bert Marisol is like my kind of, I liked her back then, but I really love her work now. She does, to me, she does an oil what I would love to get to. I would love my oils to look more like my pastels, frankly. So,
well, let's
and-
take a look at the oils, Helena,
Okay.
and tell us what you mean
Okay.
when you say that.
Well, this is the preliminary toning for an oil that of Devon. Okay, if we could maybe see the painting. This is the finished painting. And I start out, instead of drawing it, I actually use more like a tonal wash, and that I cover the whole surface with, and then wipe it out with a rag. So I get the preliminary, it's more about shape than line when I do oils. Then I let that dry, and I felt like I wanted to just hint at the colors. I wanted to make sure that that red came through, but I just wanted to hint at the colors on this one. And then there's a lot of hot color there because of the underlying, I use transparent oxide red. A lot of that shows through. So I needed something to kind of balance that, and the cool blues of the woman on the left, I think, help with that. And she picks up the colors that are in the sky. But for me, it's very different. Instead of line, it's more value and shape when I do an oil.
This picture is fascinating to me because you have these bright figures in the foreground, and yet your eye is drawn past them to that blue.
Well, it's because there's more. If you had an equal amount, it would be hard to decide which one to look at. But because it's smaller, your eye goes right there.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, another oil, please, Jen. Okay. We have a story here, Helena.
Okay. I belong to a great plein air group called Peace Valley Plein Air Painters, and we go to different wonderful places to paint. And usually it's like around 8:30 in the morning till noon. And this place is called Linden Hill Gardens, which is Jerry Fritz's nursery place near Ottsville. It's on the way to the Harrow on 611. And I was set up quite a distance from the barn. It's a very large barn. So I was quite a distance away. And so this one is the pastel. And I did that. I did that on location. I don't think I really did much after. The light was in my eyes. There was a lot of color bouncing around everywhere, a lot of light bouncing around. And so I was pretty happy with it. But when I walked up to the building a little later and the light had changed, I realized that the color of the barn, all the colors were different than I had seen yards back. And I think the barn had like a teal colored trim on it. Here it was all purple to me. So I thought, wow, I'm happy with it, but it's really not at all what the actual subject is. So I realized how much the light affected my perception of it.
Okay. And shall we look at the painting? There we
Sure.
go. The oil.
So a few years later, when I started doing more oils, I often will try to do one that I have done before in pastel, because that gives me a head start. I've already worked out some things. I know some things are going to, I have a better chance of things working out. So when I went to get the photograph for the barn that I had taken at the same time, I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, there's like nothing here. There's no life, there's no color. So what I did was I had a photo print of the pastel, and I did the painting from the pastel rather than from the photograph, because
Okay.
it just made me realize how it's all about perception.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are two lovely paintings. Are you happy with how your oil looks here in terms of wanting it to look more like a pastel?
Well, yes, I'm very happy with this painting because I felt like I put colors down and I just left them. I left them, and I have more individual. It's more impressionistic. I felt like I put colors down and didn't try to blend them as much. So for me, this is on its way to what I'm working for.
Okay. And Jen, I think we have a couple of more. We're running out of time. I'd like to get one more. There we go. This one too, I wanted to ask you about this, Helena, because at one point you said, at one point in our conversations, you said not to have too many points of interest. And you've got a lot going on in this picture. So how do you direct the viewer?
Well, really, there is no real center of interest here. You're right.
Oh, I didn't mean to call
7
you
of
out,
you.
Helena.
That's a lot. Okay,
well,
well,
well, it has a very nice feeling. You tell me, now I'm embarrassed. You tell me about this picture.
it's fairly large for me. It's a 16 by 20. And of course, it's one of the exhibits at the Mercer Museum. And I just love the shapes of it. And I dry brushed most of it with just like umbers and transparent red oxide. And that probably takes up most of the area. So that's the dominant color. And then I try to get some cools, especially with the pewter plate or whatever that is in the background. The hardest part of it all was that green door on the left. I had to keep toning it down and toning it down and toning it down so it would work. It was kind of, if I hadn't done that, it would have been very garish and popped up. But I still wanted to do justice to the actual scene.
Yeah.
Then the green is picked up in the copper pot on the right, on the bottom right.
I think there's some in the shadows too in the foreground. Is that right?
Right.
A little
And
bit.
I just love the shapes of all the slicers on top, and then the spoon rest, and it was just, it was artfully put together by the museum curator. So this was in the RED show from the Arts and Cultural Council, and their theme was Mercer, Henry Mercer.
Okay.
So this is homage to him.
It's a lovely picture, Helena, and you've just been lovely. What a pleasure to have you on Phillips Mill Art Talk. You've been great. I hope you feel good.
I feel relieved.
Well, you're
Thank
great.
you. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for whoever viewed in, and you know,
It's a pleasure. Come back anytime. Okay.
thank you.
Thanks to all of you in the audience also for joining us. And I hope you'll come back next week. Something a little bit different. We have Trenton graffiti artist Leon Rainbow. We're very excited to welcome him to Art Talk. That show is guest produced by Chi Bravo in conjunction with her work on Path of Miracles, a musical pilgrimage put on by the Lotus Project in Trenton, New Jersey. And that Art Talk is June 21st. I hope you'll join us then. Thanks to Jean Mihich, who produced today's show. Thanks to Jen McHugh, our technical director. And from me, from Phillips Mill Art Talk, I'm Laura Womack. Thanks again. Good night.